Okay, everybody, here we are for another CoVida conversation. I love the name CoVida. We're actually in this together, life together in a time of pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'm here with my friend Hazel Henderson, my friend of many, many years. We have a mutual admiration society. I think I'm righter than she is but we both love each other. And I've asked Hazel to reflect for just about 15, 20 minutes, something short that we can chew on about what is coming alive in this moment of pandemic, sequester, virus. What are we learning? What are we seeing in this moment that we can nurture and we can notice, nurture, and, in some way bottle for the future because there'll be a time after pandemic. And we really, it's possible to go back to business as unusual as it was, but maybe we're going to go forward. And so what are we going to go forward? What is the promising things that we see now that we could go forward into? So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Hazel.
Hello. Well, thank you, Vicki, and everything you said. I endorse 100%. We are a mutual admiration society, and we've been around together for a long, long time. And basically, I got into all of this trying to understand how the planet functions, and then began looking at how the human society had ended up, colonizing the entire planet and sort of extincting other species and putting those two things together. I wrote a book back in 1981 called The Politics of the Solar Age. And nobody, of course, knew anything about what I was talking about. And that book was almost, it was reviewed very well in the New York Times and in New Scientist. And it's now in 800 libraries in 20 languages, because now we are beginning to realize, many of us, that the planet now is our programmed learning environment for we humans. And the planet is teaching us all the lessons about our unsustainable ways of life, ways of being, the individualism, the egotism, the competition, all of the kind of economy, and the unsustainable technologies. I don't have to go into all the details. And so it seems to me right now that what's happening is this kind of a paradigm contest going on between those of us who see a renewable future beyond fossil fuels and nuclear power, a more localized and earth-based kind of economy worldwide, where we connect a lot with our wonderful communications technology. We share recipes rather than shipping goods around. We don't ship cakes and cookies, we ship the recipes. And so I see a huge opportunity in this latest lesson that the planet's teaching us. And, if the people who want to go back to the quote, business as usual, 19th century type of economy, the way Trump and many of the business community does at the moment, what I think will happen is that planet Earth will just create one more crisis after another. And it'll be floods and fires and sea level rise and you name it. And the collapse of the food supply, another virus, more and more. It will go on until they learn that the planet, that nature's in charge. And, you cannot override nature's principles for very long. And that's the main lesson, I think. And the webinar we had last week, I was just sort of summarizing what are the two lessons that we can implement right now that nature's telling us. Well, one is don't cut down trees. And the other is don't kill animals and trade them and eat them. And those are the two main reasons that we have this particular pandemic. And that is, you know, all of the, when we overstress the environment and cut down forests, then that means that you release all of these organisms that were safely enfolded in that way. And at the same time, if you have an economy which creates a tremendous amount of poverty and hunger, then people go in and kill bushmeat, whether it's monkeys or rats or bats or whatever. And there you are. You've got this transition to the human food supply. So those two lessons are really pretty simple. And then I began to discuss, and I've been doing a lot on this now. I've put a few things up on our website, ethicalmarkets.com, what we call our latest headlines, about the taboo subject that we haven't been able to fully discuss until almost recent, you know, in the last couple of days. And that is the current medical industrial paradigm is declaring war on this virus. And that because we didn't properly fund our public health systems and all of the cutting, the budget cutting, and the misunderstanding about money, one of the good things that's happened now is we all now understand that there's no shortage of money. Not at all. And we see all of the central banks in the world printing it as fast as they can. And those people in the Congress passing these huge, quote unquote, stimulus bills. And a lot of them used to say, oh, well, where's the money coming from? Oh dear, you know, we've got to balance the budget, blah, blah, blah. And now they're suddenly saying, no. I mean, is it 3 billion, 2 trillion? Let's get it out there, you know. So we've gone from we've gone from budget deficits and cutting public services and austerity to helicopter money in the matter of a week. So that's the encouraging thing. Humans actually can change their minds and actually can learn when they are stressed enough. And so that's and then the other thing is that the whole idea has been that because we haven't done enough testing, everybody has to be on lockdown. All 330 million of us have to be on lockdown. And of course, it wouldn't have been necessary if we'd had the testing in place. But the thing we need to do now, in my view, is we have to start testing in this new way that we're now allowed to talk about, apparently. And that is doing a very simple blood test, which is a little finger stick. And you test whether the person has antibodies, which says that they've had the virus and they don't even know that they've had it because they've been asymptomatic. And the new number now on CNN by official, you know, surgeon in residence is that he estimated that 25% of the American population has either had it and didn't know about it, or has it right now and is surviving. And basically all of those people will be immune. And so then the whole thing becomes, even if the immunity, many people think the immunity to that particular virus will last a lifetime. But even if the immunity only lasts for 6 months or a year, it means that all of those people can go back into work. and we can have the beginnings of a more normal life. And the new thing to do, instead of locking up all 330 million of us, all we need to do is to shelter in place the 30% of us who are like me, over 70, and those who have serious pre-existing conditions. And isn't it a lot easier to protect and shelter 30 million people than all 330 million of us? And it's only because we were left with no options that we got into this rather unbelievable situation. And as you and I were talking about that, at what point does the mental cruelty of this policy of everybody having to be locked away and losing their jobs, at what point does that become untenable? That, you know, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's depression or whether it's the sheer terror of all of these working people who've lost their livelihoods and don't know how they're going to pay the rent, or are they going to be homeless? I mean, the mental anguish that this is putting mostly poorer people through is pretty unconscionable if there's another way of doing it.
Right. Right. So it's almost like our system itself, in so many ways, what you're saying is the narrative and the structures that it creates, the worldview and the worldview's minions in terms of banking, finance, laws. That worldview is almost caused the virus. And in the sense that this is a worldview virus, and that the virus is unraveling something. And part of our suffering really is in our lockdown is that it could have been different with a different worldview. I mean, the virus may have come or may not, but it could have been different.
Yes.
Yeah. So what can be different? What, you know, if we're going to have some building blocks for something new coming out of this, what would be the building blocks?
Well, the building blocks are very much similar to the Green New Deal, let's face it. You know, and there's a huge impetus in the Congress, as well as in the European Union, where they call it the Green Deal. Everybody realizes, oh, I see, if money isn't scarce, why wouldn't we print the money and invest it in our future? Invest it in LED lighting and electric cars and retrofitting all of our public buildings and doing Medicare for all and cutting off the student debt so that the kids can have a future. And why wouldn't we do all of those things? Now we know that there's no shortage of money. Right. And so this next stimulus, because, you know, we've had, what, 3 now, and the next one they're talking about is going to be about the Green New Deal. Everybody's talking about infrastructure.
Right.
And it can't be going back to the past. It's got to be green infrastructure.
Right.
And it's got to be, of course, it's got to be a just transition so that all those people through no fault of their own who lost their jobs, whether it's in coal or whether people who've lost their jobs because of this lockdown, those people, of course, have to be helped through this thing to take their place in the new economy. And I think that what the people who've been promoting the New Deal were trying to say all along is exactly this whole thing about money. And what they were saying is, do you really imagine that Franklin Roosevelt, when he put together the New Deal, he didn't have to pass the hat around and have people put their tax money in before he could invest in the Hoover Dam or whatever? It's done by government guarantee. it's done by floating bonds, and it's done basically by printing money. And if
Right.
he hadn't done it that way, Los Angeles would still be a village,
Right.
you know? And so people just have to understand the same thing. Just imagine with President Kennedy in the moonshot. I mean, if he had actually said, oh, well, we have to collect all the taxes before we can put the city of Houston onto the map and make it into the, ground central for the, I mean, all he did was announce that target, and then the rest of the economy falls in behind, and everybody knows what to do. And so I have a lot of hope that this crisis is big enough to conform to what always has been my model, and that is that in human societies, you have breakdowns of all of these unsustainable activities, and the breakdowns create the breakthroughs and drive the breakthroughs, because
Right.
only when we have a big breakdown and get kicked in the ass do human beings change.
Wow. So help me out here, because isn't there an assumption behind the kind of infrastructure projects from the New Deal or the moonshot? There's always an assumption that it's kicking over a financial flow. That it's kicking over something that will actually expand the economy, so that so that it's not diluting the money. It's not just like flooding money out and creating an inflationary
Well, you see,
experience.
and that was the other mantra of the austerity crowd, and the balanced budget crowd. They didn't understand that when you increase the money supply, as long as you are investing it in actual productive new structures, there isn't any inflation. But the way they've done it in the past was just, oh, well, we'll give everybody a tax cut. And then the tax cut, people don't spend the money into the economy. It simply goes into assets. And so you have asset inflation, and basically nothing in the economy gets moving.
Right.
And so that's the secret, is making sure that the money you print doesn't go into buying toxic mortgage packages and all kinds of dud loans or tax cuts for companies to buy up their own stock or whatever, which keeps it in the old financial loop. Instead of that, you put it out into the real economy. And as long as it goes to productive goods and services and employs people in useful activities, you don't have any inflation. And the best example, now, my dear friend, Ellen Brown, she's just done another fabulous article for us. And it's called, Did the Fed Just Get Nationalized? And you see, there was always this so-called independence of the Fed, which was always a mirage, really.
Right.
But now they've realized that the only way to pump the money out fast enough to create enough purchasing power to prevent a deep depression is that they now need Treasury and the Fed to get together and work in tandem to make sure that all this money they're printing goes to actual real enterprises and to re-employ real people and invest in real productive goods and services. And, and this is what Abe has done in Japan. And there's no way they get their inflation rate up to even the 2% of their target. They are still in deflation. And the problem in a situation like this for our economy is that we'll sink into continued deflation.
Right. So how does state banking um role? I mean, I understand what you're saying is that it's not that you print money, it's where you put the new money
Yes,
such that it creates it doesn't it creates as many jobs as possible, not winking out of existence, and creates new opportunities for work, and it possibly creates like even a new medical system. It creates it actually, this money can create, but it has to be placed correctly. It
it has
can't
to
be
disappear.
placed into old industries, and now it seems like it's being placed into the fossil fuel industry
Yes.
and to, the pipeline industry. So, I mean, and we can just count on our president to do everything wrong. We can just look at what he's
Yes.
doing and sort of see the outline of what has to happen.
There's the temptation to bail out all the incumbent industries that have, bought politicians. That is the big danger. So that's the paradigm of the past, and it will be a struggle between those folks who want to revive the 19th century and keep all of their vested interests and their tax breaks and everything else, or whether we are willing to invest in an entirely new kind of economy with electrified public transportation and LED lighting and all of the efficiency that our new technologies provide, the circular economy, where companies will be like, I've got an investment, actually it's stock options, in a company which is a typical of this new circular economy, which will take any kind of cruddy waste stream and through good science turns it into useful products and services, and so that we're never using any more of the earth's resources. We're simply upscaling and upcycling the resources that have heretofore been wasted. And so there's no reason whatsoever that we can't build a new public health oriented medical system based on prevention, that we can't build a more sustainable food system beyond the 5 monocultured crops that we currently are traded in by commodity traders, and
Right.
that are really bad for us, and all of
Right.
these meat diets. And so, all of this is so eminently doable. I mean, the shift to plant-based
Right.
foods and beverages, which is now double-digit growth all last year with all of the startup companies. And the group I've been working with, which is a consortium of investors who happen to be animal rights people and vegans and vegetarians from around the world, and they have 16 trillion of AUM, assets under management. They're the ones that are funding all of these new startup companies, oat milk and soy milk and whatever. And they're also shorting the 16 big meat producing companies because they say we can no longer afford to kill and factory raise animals. It's destroying the antibiotics which we need. It's unhealthy. It creates 15% of all of our greenhouse gases, and it's causing heart disease and diabetes. I mean, this is just a no-brainer.
So here's what I'm taking away from this, because I don't want to overtake your time. It's that in this moment of pandemic, we need to dream way bigger,
Way bigger. Yeah.
way bigger. If we say, okay, money is not the choke point, but how it is spent for the kind of prosperity we want in the future. Prosper is pro esperare, which is hopeful, you know, what that we may have, we may not have the entire, you know, we don't have all the paints, we don't have all the paintbrushes, but we have enough paint and paintbrushes to paint on the canvas, just like you're doing right now. Something that is so possible, given that we've proven that money is not scarce,
Right.
but it has to be placed where it's going to create the kind of prosperity we want. And that also gives all of us, I mean, people who are not you, Hazel, you know, have to think through the sort of this generative economic system. But it gives us something really to chew on. I mean, I would say everybody should go to ethicalmarkets.com,
Oh,
right? Not net.com,
dot,
net,
dot
.com.
com.
Go ethicalmarkets.com and just read, and but read with this question of what is the biggest picture I can paint
Yeah.
of what's possible in the future. Yes, there's going to be suffering, and there's a lot of suffering. Yes, people are going to die. There's going to be a lot of that. But people die. People die. You know, that's sort of like a part of the design. You know, so so to have compassion in the short term for the suffering, but to be bold in your imagination, in the sort of mid-ground vision. It's not like, oh, it'll all be better when I go to heaven, but it's like there's a possibility here because money has been released.
Yes, and this is so easy, really, when you realize that there's a group we work with in London and now in Brussels as well called Positive Money. And they produced a book last year, which I did a review of, called A Green Bank of England. And they pointed out that the Bank of England could, with the stroke of a pen, change its algorithm, and instead of just printing money and have it go back into the financial system, which is what happens if you don't do anything positive, instead of that, they pointed out that they could do, the Bank of England could do a Green New Deal. And they could say, okay, we're printing this money, and here's where it has to go. You know, it has to go to building out a wind generator all over. It has to go, you know, to beefing up the National Health Service. It has to go to providing helicopter money. Yes, you know, this is a guaranteed income for the short term,
Right.
so that everybody can reposition themselves. And I got in touch with them last week, and they've opened an office in Brussels. And this is the coup. It's on our website. They went to Christine Lagarde,
Right.
taken over at the ECB, and they got an appointment with her, took the book about the Green Bank of England, and said, look, the EU wants to do a Green Deal, and we need the ECB to, when it's buying up all these bonds, because she's picking up right where Mario Draghi left off and said, God, it's to do whatever we have to do, whatever it takes. We'll buy all the dud bonds of everybody if we have to. And so they had an appointment with her, and she has promised to bring forth to the G20 and the EU the whole idea of directing the money printing toward building a positive, productive infrastructure.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Whenever I talk to you, it feels like all of this stuff is easy and obvious, and we'll just do it. And but in a way, it's like we can work for it practically in some way, but we can. Our imagination is a powerhouse tool, and we should never let it be occupied by the assumption that the money and power holders are going to grab onto the situation, which they are. We know this.
Yeah.
And that they will once again win. And I know I have become quite exhausted with holding a positive vision in the face of an implacable system. But I
Yeah.
think right now, because of the printing of money, things are loosened up and we can raise that up. So
Yes.
anyway, is there something that you would like to say in closing so we have a nice little package?
Yes. Well, I've been talking to many of my author friends who are of my vintage and your vintage, and we've been all talking together about the wonderful, wonderful lives that we've led, and that we have kind of lived through the fantasy land, last expression of the unsustainable kind of economy, and we've benefited from it, and we have no fear of death. And even though I've been alone here for 2 weeks, if I got sick, I would probably die alone. Nobody would know. And I feel I've almost gone virtual anyway, because everything I do is online. And so what we've been talking about together is making sure that we do not resuscitate those little yellow things you have around your neck, because I don't want to be taken to a hospital. I don't want to be part of the medical industrial complex. And hospitals are probably the most dangerous places in the world right now. And basically, I'm perfectly happy with the life I've led. And we were all sharing that, and feeling that the kind of medical system that we have at the moment, the profit-driven medical system, it turns all of these very elderly people that are in nursing homes into profit centers. It's terrible. And it's just keeping these poor old, I mean, I know this happened with my late husband. And he had to end up in the last 2 years of his life in a nursing home. And I went to see him every day, and he used to say, "Oh, I really just want to go. I've had a wonderful life. I just want to go. And the way we've set it up now, the medical system is all built on the idea of fear of death. Well, death is part of life. And I remember when I was a kid growing up in England, my parents and all of the parents would send us kids to measles parties, mumps parties, whooping cough parties. There was no vaccinations in those days. And the idea was all the kids had to have full immunity by the time they were 5 so that they could go into school. And, this virus is not, most people survive this virus. And if you look at the death figures, say in Italy, about 95% of the deaths in Italy were people over 70 with very serious existing health conditions. And so for most people, they're going to get over this, they're going to be immune. And in all of human history, that's the way pandemics have subsided, is that a percentage of the population becomes immune. And we cannot face up to the idea that we're just a biological species like all the other biological species. And germs and viruses are just part of our lives. Always will be.
Right. So important. We're part of nature, and that what comes along with it is viruses, and what also comes along with it is death, and to
Yes.
be completely, I mean, as you are, the idea of going virtual, to be so reconciled with your death that's something that's not the issue at the moment. And the other part of it is that herd immunity will come,
It will.
and
Mm.
life goes on, and there's going to be lots of future ahead. It's you and I might not be in it, but there's going to be lots ahead, and we've laid as good as we could. We've laid some stepping stones, and that this talk is one of them. And I want to thank you so much, Hazel. I could listen
Oh,
to you forever, and I don't want you to go virtual at all. But anyway,
well,
I
I will
wish you
try.
well. I really wish you well.
And I do
I
the
wish you
same.
well. And you and I should get on the horn with, or get on Zoom with
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Will you do one of my webinars? I'm doing a whole series of
Yeah,
webinars.
yeah, sure. Happy to do
Good.
that.
Oh, good. Wonderful. I'll be in touch with you on that.
Okay. Love you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.